All right, good morning, everyone. How's my audio working? Can you hear me? I want to give me a thumbs up or go off mute.
Good morning. Yes, I can hear you, sir.
All right, cool. Got a thumbs up, so I think we're going to start. All right. So there's only a few of you here, but I like to start on time. So either it'll just be the three of us for an hour and a half, or the people will jump in on their own a little later. So I'll try to track the raised hands or questions. If you have the ability and you have a question, don't mind interrupting me. Just if I don't see your hand up virtually, then just unmute and ask me a question. So this morning we're gonna continue with the Ignite series, and today it's making and receiving offers. See, we have a couple of chat already. All right, cool. Good morning. So this is oftentimes a dry class, but I'll try to make it interesting and fun for you. You can't see it. I wrote up on the board a little note to myself, and something I've told agents for a long time, 20 years of training agents. Contracts are like defensive driving. I have two young daughters who just recently started driving 4 and 2 years ago. And when I was training them, I would always tell them, taking them on the streets here in Silicon Valley on the freeways, I would tell them, always be a defensive driver. So you have to assume when you're driving that the people who are around you are not as aware, are not as prepared, are not paying attention as closely as you are. So you always have to assume while you're driving that other people are going to make mistakes or do the unexpected. Contracts is kind of like that too. I wrote up here, defensive driving and contracts, knowing contracts really well in this business, they'll get you where you want to go safely, on time, and it'll save you money, right? How does it save you money? Most lawsuits in real estate are tied directly to the contract, or at least they're pointed to gaps, issues, or problems in the contract. The better you get at writing contracts, the better you'll be able to negotiate deals for your buyers and sellers, which will allow you to grow, allow you to make money. The cleaner they are, the better you understand it, and the better you explain it to your clients, you'll keep the money in your pockets. You won't get sued. Now, I've had the pleasure of coaching and training agents for a long time now, a couple of decades here in Silicon Valley. And I'm proud to say in that time, never have I experienced a lawsuit based on a real estate transactions. I'm pretty sure I'm probably one of the few brokers or managers that can say that in Silicon Valley. This is California, after all, a very litigious state. And it's not for lack of number of deals. I've estimated in my career, I've probably reviewed close to $8 billion in real estate contracts. So I'm proud of that, not only amount, but keeping them clean. And I always told agents, that's one of the big keys. The better you understand the contract, the better you will do. So we're gonna jump into that. Understanding the contracts, making and receiving offers. And again, if you have any questions, raise your hand virtually. If I don't spot it quick enough, just unmute if you have that ability and just say, hey, Robert, I got a quick question. If I go too fast, because I tend to go fast, you can ask me to repeat or slow it down. We have about an hour and 20 minutes. I want to end at right around 10:20. So we have some time for question and answers. And there's a class following me in here, so I gotta clear out. So let's jump in. All right, if you've been attending all of Ignite, and you should have, we're right a ways through it. We're on section 17, making and receiving offers. And the last thing we want to know is we don't want to waste all you've learned starting your career, building your career, lead generating, growing your database, capturing leads, all that hard work of prospecting, which is your number one job, getting out, showing properties, making offers, reviewing offers, and then you blow it there. I mean, this has got to be the slam dunk. This is when you get to the client to this point, you can't lose it there. The listing side, especially in this market, it's a little easier. We'll cover all that. But where a lot of agents are hanging up right now is in writing the offer and writing a winning offer. There are no magical secrets, but there are tips and tricks, and along with the basics, I'll share some of that and things that we understand to help you win and make your time valuable. All right. So there's no one in the classroom, so it tells me to ask someone to read our belief system, so I'll read it for you. All right. So win-win or no deal, integrity, do the right thing. Customers always come first. Commitment in all things. Communication, seek first to understand. Creativity, ideas before results. Teamwork, together everyone achieves more. Trust starts with honesty, equity, opportunities for all, and success results through people. All right, so here we go. I like to think of sales as the ability to gracefully persuade, not manipulate a person or persons into a win-win situation. How does that relate to contracts, right? The contracts are the terms of agreement between a buyer and seller on how to transfer that property from one to the other. I'm a big believer, there's an old saying that in a perfect negotiation, neither side is quite happy. If one side is really, really, really happy, then they probably got over on the other party. And unfortunately, that can happen when there's an inequality in experience or temperament or just simply a situation of the agents involved. We'll talk about that. You never want to be that agent that is on the other side of where that client is. The other party is really, really happy and yours isn't. Yours is reluctantly closing on the transaction. There's a lot of factors that go into that. But when you learn to navigate the contract, learn to understand what are the terms, why are they there, how were they used, you can learn a lot from that and make sure you're not in that system. So let's talk about the offer process. Let's jump right into it. All right. Let me catch up here. So we see here on the slide kind of a decision tree. Starting with buyer side, buyer makes an offer, right? As I said, you've already gone through all the prospecting, all the other things you need to learn and ignite to be a successful realtor. And now you're at the point, you go and show a property, your client likes it, they want to make an offer. What happens? You write the offer, you submit it. The seller responds in one of three ways: counters the offer, accepts the offer, or rejects the offer, right? There is a fourth that agents think exists, but I'll explain that. Does anybody have an idea what that fourth possibility is? This shows seller counters the offer, accepts the offer, or rejects the offer. Anybody think of a fourth? No response. Has anybody ever written an offer and gets no response? So I've experienced that as a broker many, many times. Agents come to me like, I wrote the offer, I submitted it, I called them, they're ghosting me, they're not responding. And I remind them, they did respond, that's a rejection, right? So there's a little tip there. If that ever happens to you, that's a rejection, right? So you follow the pattern there. So once you get to one of these, they counter the offer. You wrote your offer, you submitted it, and they counter it, right? What does a counter mean? A counter means they rejected the initial offer, perhaps not in full, maybe one or two or a few of the terms, and then they're saying, we're not quite happy with your offer, but if you can make these amendments, perhaps we can get in a contract, right? Very common, nothing to fear, nothing to worry about, and that's when you got into negotiation, right? This is the first time where really understanding the contract at a high level can help in that negotiation process. And we'll get some examples of that in a second. The second thing is they accept the offer. If they accept the offer, congratulations, make your Facebook post, tell all your friends, you're happy, everyone's happy, and that begins the contract to close process. Don't forget, you're still in the contract. The steps, the guidance that the contract offers is extremely important A lot of agents, especially new agents, make that mistake of they're in the contract and they forget all the contingencies if they have them, or the dates or steps involved. Every single action, every single activity, once you have been accepted into contract, creates negotiating opportunities for buyers and sellers, depending on what situation arises. So never forget that. Once they accept it, you're just getting started. You don't just wait for 30 days and cash a check. You're working actively and earnestly on your client's behalf with every little step that happens. As we go through the contract in a bit, we'll talk about some of those things. And then the third thing, seller rejects the offer. Buyer agent contacts listing agent to learn more. Don't assume no means no. Can anybody think of some of the good reasons why you should contact the listing agent, and if they're helpful, and answer? What can you learn from that?
Seller's motivation.
We refuse to participate. I already know the answer. I have my coffee, I can wait.
In your question, like why we need to
Somebody
contact
unclick themselves. What can you learn from a rejected offer? Why would you call a listing agent?
rejected.
Especially in this market. How many have written an offer that didn't get accepted? And then there was a second that didn't get accepted, and a third that didn't get accepted.
Then we will advise our client don't get that mistake.
All right, folks, this is a classroom. I already know this stuff. You can read the slides. You need to participate. I can wait all day. What's something you can learn?
And find out the circumstances why the offer was rejected, a little bit more about it. Because sometimes direct communication, you can get more information back than just get it on.
All right. Warren says someone was talking, but I don't think you can hear her. All right, well, oops. Oh, yeah, so our technology is failing us. Okay, I'm gonna be the one that talks then. All right, thanks for letting me know, Warren. So, especially if you're with a first-time buyer or a new buyer, or as the market is moving really, really fast, you're gonna wanna find out why. In most cases, a good listing agent and one that's helpful and follows the code and helps their fellow agents, they'll tell you, your offer was way too low. The contingency, the seller didn't like the contingencies, things like that. Everything you learn, even when you submit an offer that is not accepted, is going to get you closer to that next close of escrow, the next accepted offer. And then you never want to come back to your buyer and just say they didn't accept it. And then they ask you why, and you're like, I don't know, right? Ostensibly, they made the offer with your recommendations on price, on terms, and things like that. So if you're not getting any feedback, that's a really awkward position to be in with your buyer, saying, I don't know. Now, if you reach out to the listing agent and the listing agent doesn't offer any advice, doesn't answer, doesn't pick up, then that's an acceptable answer to your client, right? But don't ever be caught in a situation where you get rejected and you don't reach out, you don't find anything out, and then you have nothing to say to your buyer. Think about how that makes them feel about your effectiveness and your responsibility to them. So a lot of agents fear that, especially as you're starting a career, reaching out and asking. It's an integral part of the process. The reality is in today's market, most clients are making more than one offer. You've done the hard work of getting them as your client, getting them to understand that you're fighting for them, you're their fiduciary, you're looking out for their wants and needs. Don't get trapped in that one simple thing because you don't reach out. It's okay if you reach out. If I'm the listing agent, you made an offer on and I'm a bad agent and I don't have the time or the empathy to respond to your call or text or email and give you some reasons on why it wasn't accepted, then you did your job. You can't force me to do something, but never be caught in that situation. Know these steps, know these processes, and make sure that you're helping your client understand them. All right, so asking for ahas. This is going to be a little weird. I'm going to focus on the chat in case anyone is asking any questions or following along, since I can't hear you for some reason. All right. All right, so let's move ahead to preparing the offer. Hopefully you have your participant guides. If not, you can download them later and review this. But remember, as you prepare to write an offer, obviously you already have a relationship with your client. They've already agreed to work with you. There should be a good relationship there. When you prepare to write the offer, the very first thing, or one of the very first things you want to do, is establish a relationship with the listing agent, right? In some cases, you know them, you've met them, you know of them. And in some cases, they're brand new to you. So what do? Remember, your relationship with the listing agent begins on first contact, that very first time you talk to them. And if you've never worked with them before, then you've got to rely on expectations, our code of ethics, how we're supposed to be working with each other. We're not adversarial. It's always surprised me that some listing agents, that they don't want to answer the phone, they don't call you back. Don't let that deter you. Do your job, do the hard part, and call them. And what I found always, as you get more and more experienced, you reach out, and what are some of the things that you want to do when you're reaching out, right? Some of the things that we teach that we like to do is we like to ask what some of the sellers' motivations are. You would be shocked how many times a listing agent will tell you. Sometimes they just clam up. Sometimes they won't say anything. They feel like, well, I don't want to give anything away. I never understood that, right? You're trying to get the highest and best offer for your client. There's nothing wrong, in my opinion, of making it like a little mini auction and letting the buyer's agents to contact you know what kind of interest there is in the property, what kind of offers you may have received. You don't have to give them the exact wording, but that ultimately helps your seller if they do it. Now, if you call someone and they are not helpful at all, they don't want to give you answers, maybe they don't have any offers on the table, maybe they don't have any interest. That's important information too, right? Some of it you're guessing, some of it you're trying to understand. What I like to do is I like to look up the agent that we're dealing with. I like to know what kind of business did they do in the past, how many transactions in that area, in that price point. If you have access to, I look as deeply as what is their usual listed sales price ratio, right? You've all heard or should have heard by now, there's three ways you can list. You can list under to try to elicit a bunch of responses. You can list right at market value to avoid a lot of the gains, or you can list it high to minimize the number of people that are contacting you. You can look up agents' past records and have an idea. I looked at one last night. One of the agents on my team has a buyer looking at a property who was in the buyer's price point, right? She texted me and said, how about this property? I looked up the agent, and I know that agent always lists around 5% below market value. Now, mind you, we're in a market where listings are selling about 2 to 3% over asking value in there. So I told her, it's a great property, but the reality is that thing's going to be about 100K over our client budget. So don't be afraid of looking stuff up like that. As you get more experience, as you get more knowledgeable, that's an incredible tool to help you figure that out and how that works. So there's two ways of contact: directly talking to the agent, but if you know where to look, there's a ton of information on every listing agent in the Valley. Key tip there, you're a listing agent too. So understand at some point somebody might look you up and know how you do business, and make sure that assume that they know everything about you. That's going to make you a better negotiator, right? I never think, oh, this person's not doing their work, they're not doing their homework, they're not paying attention. I always expect the person on the other side, the agent on the other side, is as good or better than I am. Keeps you on your toes, makes you work hard, doesn't allow you to get lazy or take shortcuts. And the reality is, That's usually not the case. But imagine if that's how you prepare each time. Imagine each time you're in a contract situation, you're assuming I'm going up against a really good agent, expert marketer, expert negotiator, really good with contracts, really good with clients. It forces you to really up your game. All right. There are some things you want to keep clicking the wrong way. Sorry about that. All right, I'm preparing the offer. All right, so a couple of simple, really key points. This is where a lot of agents get bogged down in preparing to write the offer. If you're newer, expect to take at least 30 minutes, even an hour to prepare your first offers. And there's a reason for that. One is just understanding the process, be familiar with all the different steps. Once you get really good, once you get really experienced, right, you can write a really good offer in 10, 15 minutes, right? If you're not there yet, don't panic, don't worry. You will learn this over time. You will figure it out. If you're just starting, an exercise I always like to give to my agents, new agents, let's say that you're a new agent, or maybe not as experienced an agent, maybe you haven't done more than 5 or 10 transactions, especially if you have a farm. Here's a key tip. Anytime a property comes on the market in your farm, let's say you're marketing Cupertino. Let's say you're marketing an area where the average price is 2.3 million. Every single time there's a new listing in your farm, prepare an offer, right? Whether you have a buyer or not. Why would you do that? A couple reasons. As I just explained, once you get more experience with the process and all of this, you're going to be able to hone your offer writing skills to where you're writing really, really good quality offers, 10, 15, 20 minutes max, right? The reality is the average agent does 3 or 4 transactions a year once you gain some experience. Imagine if you're only writing 10 or 15 contracts a year. So some agents, that's all they do, right? You will learn over time. You will get good over time, right? But pick your farm. Every time a listing comes up, prepare to write an offer. Follow these steps. A couple things you're going to learn, right? As we'll follow along. Ensure the first thing you want to do, ensure the property is still available, especially in this market, right? Some of the properties come off the market in 2 or 3 days, a week or so, depending on when you find it, when your client finds it, when they see it. The first step's got to be sure it's still available. Going on MLS and seeing it's still active is not enough. Don't make that mistake. Again, defensive driving. When you see it active on MLS, you're assuming the listing agent is doing their job properly, right? That could be a big mistake. You never want to be in a position where you just check MLS, it's still active, you write the offer, you send it in, and they're like, oh, it's already in contract, right? But it shows active on MLS is not a good response to your buyer, is it? Don't ever make that mistake. Make sure it's still available. You never want to come to your buyer and say, oh, I'm sorry, we just spent an hour going over this offer and I submitted it, but it sold last night. They're not going to accept, oh, but the agent forgot to or didn't change it on MLS. Call them, text them, do what you can to find out that it's still available. When you do that, that's when you start building rapport with the listing agent, right? And again, always defensive driving. You've got to be the good partner in this situation. I've always taught my agents, once you're ready to write an offer, you've got to be prepared to do both sides of the job. What does that mean? Right? The first thing, you want to build rapport with the listing agent, right? Ask them good questions, ask them professional questions. What's the interest on the property? What are the expectations of your seller? Is there an offer deadline? As many of those questions as you can. You're showing that you're engaged. You're showing that you're involved. when you show your knowledge by asking those questions, you're starting to set an expectation on the listing side. And that is very simply, I can close, right? From the very first time, whether it's your first offer or your 100th offer, the very first thing you want to start establishing with the listing agent is, I'm the kind of agent that closes deals. Worse than not getting an offer is getting an offer that's going to TFT, right? Put yourself in the listing agents for a second. They went through the process. They accepted your offer 5, 6, 10, 15 days later. They've got to tell their seller they're not going to close. There's no better motivation for a listing agent than knowing that you close. I know that I've experienced many times in my career, either myself or our agents, getting that magic response. Hey, we had a bunch of offers, some were even higher than yours, but we're going to accept yours, right? Why on earth, if the listing agent is doing their best for their seller, why would they ever accept a lower offer? A lot of reasons, right? But if they're doing their job ethically and responsibly, it's, well, there's a higher offer, but there's not as firm on their ability to close. Or they sense it's going to start high, but then they're going to try to bring us down. When you get the reputation of you're a closer, listing agents love that. And you want to make sure that they understand that. Again, if you're newer or if you're just starting out, how do you make them understand that? You follow these steps. Assume everyone is as good as you. Assume everyone is doing this just like you. Assume that everyone else that's writing an offer is doing all these things and trying to stand out, right? Again, if you have that mindset, if you value your professionalism and your relationship with buyer and listing agent, and you operate like this is a crowded field, there's a lot of good agents writing a lot of good offers, that's going to up your game. What's the reality? Half of them are not very good offers, but you don't know that. You don't know that, and you can't act like I can, you know, just take it easy on this one. Always assume you're up against the best buyers agents out there, right? That'll start showing and building that rapport with the agent. Inquire about activity. I said this earlier, right? And sometimes they'll tell you if there's offers or not. A trick, sometimes agents don't want to tell you if there's offers or any offers. A simple trick is like, if there was an open house, how many people did you have to do the open house? Right? If you have time, you might want to go yourself if you haven't already, and look around. How many people are there? You want to ask, how many disclosures have you sent out? Right? Once you start asking those questions, then you'll start to get a sense of what is a busy open house to equate to number of offers and type of offers. What is number of packages sent out? How does that equate to numbers and offers? And again, as I said earlier, you can start to learn this. Pick your farm, every listing, do this, right? This is my farm. Even if you never had a listing there, you never had a deal there, you just picked it, your farm last week, and there's a new listing, right? Call and ask these questions. Call and ask, try to find out what's going on. Build your skills even before you have a big book of business. That's how you get a big book of business, right? So inquire about other offers on the property status. Why did they fall through? They fell through, things like that. Again, there's a whole range of types of listing agents. Some don't want to give away anything, right? If you inquire and you ask and you try, it's acceptable to go back to your buyer and say, I called, they're not being very helpful, we're kind of on our own here. Or even better, I called, they said they're expecting these many offers, the deadline is tomorrow at 11 a.m. Their expectation is to go over asking price. They're seeing no contingencies. Imagine if you're getting all this information and being able to prepare and write and communicate that to your buyers. Even if you don't win, you've got a huge leg up on the next offer when they start to like and trust what you're doing. Someone wrote, to make an offer, we have to locate a legitimate buyer, agree to this process. I'm not quite sure what it means. If you're referring to my idea of practicing, you don't have to write the offer and send it in. You never send an offer if you don't have a real buyer. I'm going to continue to come back to this if that was the point of the question. then no, you don't submit the offer. You're practicing, right? You're practicing these steps. All the steps, how to price, how to write. You don't have to wait until you have real clients. All this is legitimate practice. Think about a sports team, right? They practice plays all week. In football, they don't hit each other, right? They're just running the route. There's no contact. There's no tackling. There's no real points scored, but they're doing that. So that's my point. Oh, thank you for clarifying that. I was gonna get to that at the end, but don't submit the offer if you don't have an offer. You're just practicing, all right? Ask listing agent how they want to receive the offer, right? Now here, there's often detailed instructions on MLS. Great listing agents are very clear, they're concise, and they tell you exactly what they want to do, how they want to receive it. Do what they ask. If it's off-putting or you think it's over the top or whatever, again, building that rapport for your client, you wouldn't want to risk getting accepted because you don't agree with their process or their timing or things like that, right? So ask them. If they don't have clear instructions on MLS, how do you like to receive the offer? And follow it as closely as possible. Be flexible, all right? Obtain the buyer's pre-approval from lender. I would put that up front, but that's the first thing. But obtain it, understand it, talk to the buyer, talk to their loan officer, get as much information on them as possible. Let them know how you work. In doing that, for example, when you're reaching out for the first time and they don't call you back, right? Red flag or not? You know, you've got a buyer, you're prepared to write an offer, you call their loan officer, want to find out, you know, can we remove contingencies? If you need a loan contingency, how many days? How fast can you turn around? Can we put 25 days? Can we put 20 days? Can we put 30 days for the loan process? You will be shocked how many times that you won't get an immediate response from the loan officer's agent. When that happens, when you reach out and try to get this information to write the best possible offer and to protect your buyer, and you don't get an immediate response from the loan officer, you have to tell your buyer. You have to communicate to them. This is going to be an important step in this entire process, on this and any other offer. Please ask your loan officer to communicate to me when I reach out. Don't be shy about that. You're not throwing anyone under the bus. You're actually protecting the loan officer and your client. And in my opinion, again, as I said earlier, assume you're going to do everyone's job in this process. That's an example. Ideally, the loan officer on top of it, they respond right away. They give you an understanding of what you can or shouldn't write, perhaps. Again, some are super helpful. They'll tell you exactly how to write it. Some aren't. If they're not helpful, then it's a simple letting your buyer know that. And if the buyer has chosen them and they're going to stay with them, you've got to maneuver with that and make them understand it would be helpful. It would help a lot, but it doesn't mean that it can't be done, right? Review the MLS and tax records, produce a comparative market analysis, obtain a seller's disclosure statement and other needed documents, right? Now, Warren's on fire on the chat, man. He agrees LO is so important for either seller or buyer's agent. But yeah, I love good loan officers. But if you're a great buyer's agent, you can make great loan officers, right? Be proactive. Don't be shy. You're protecting them. You're protecting your mutual client, and you're trying to get them paid, right? never be worried about bringing that up if you have to. That's like the last cudgel, right? It's like if they're not responsive, they're helping. Like, hey, would you like to close this deal? Because they don't get paid until you get paid too, right? On this client. So don't be afraid of that. Take charge. All right. Writing the offer. All right, you have an offer checklist in your participants guide. I don't have that in front of me, unfortunately. So if you don't have it, make sure you get it. That's simply a reiteration of what you're learning here, all the things you should do. Going back to my example of practicing, right? Go find that buyer checklist. You don't want to be searching it for the first time when you've got a real live buyer on a real live offer. Know where it is, know how to obtain it, know what all the steps are, practice them, right? Again, once a week, twice a week, pick a home, ideally in your farm or the type of home that you'd like to work in, and practice these steps. Pull it out and go through the offer checklist. What are the things you need? You have them accessible. Do you know where they are? Do you know where each item is? Do you understand what each of them is, how to explain it, how to practice it, right? And these are the steps, right? The first thing is, of course, price and terms. Seller's disclosure, conveyances, earnest money, due diligence, inspection period, time for seller acceptance, financing terms, buyer pre-approval letter, closing date, home warranty, repair limits, special clauses, addenda, right? Some of these obviously seem more important than others, price and terms, things like that. But you've got to understand, again, assume that you're going up against a really qualified, really engaged buyer's agent. If you're both equally qualified and you're looking at the property, looking at what the current market conditions are and what the price should be, price might not be why you win. Terms might be why you win, right? If you're super competitive and your buyer can do it, adding a seller rent back or something like that can go a long way. It could be the reason you win or lose. Conveyances, the amount of earnest money or additional deposits, every single one of these things can be why you win or lose. And so you can't discount one over the other. You can't say only one is important. All right. Someone has a long, long message. I don't know if I can read it all right now. I might have to go back to that. So those are things you want to be able to talk about and understand and work through. Let me read this. I'm jumping at number 11 and 12, repair limits. For number 11, okay to negotiate minor repairs after getting in contract. Okay, it's a good question. It's an example of negotiating, right? So if you negotiate after you get into contract, here's an important point, and it's a good time to point this out. While you're practicing the contract, while you're going through it over and over and over, right? The thing you have to understand that often even experienced agents don't understand is the contract. It is in black and white. It is a legally binding agreement between two parties that is enforceable, right? It is also always negotiable. It is a living thing. What does that mean when I say the real estate contract is a living thing? When you submit it and they accept it and it's written in stone, it really isn't. You can always ask to negotiate. Can you negotiate a non-contingent offer, for example? You want to take a stab at that one? It's not a trick question. Can you, if you submit a non-contingent offer, can you negotiate it once it's accepted? The answer is yes. You can always negotiate it. You can always negotiate all the way up until close. Now, if it's non-contingent and the seller understands their rights under that, you might not have a strong hand in negotiating, but never forget you can. And as a fiduciary for your client, even if you've explained, you should have fully explained what a non-contingent offer is. If they come to you and say, look, we went back and looked at it again, and we have these minor repairs, we really want them, ask them to do it, right? You can ask for it. It can absolutely happen. And maybe you give and take something. So the answer to that, I think it's Warren asking, can you negotiate minor repairs after getting the contract? Yes, you can. Special clauses, we'll get to that in a second. But hopefully that answered your question, Warren. But it was a great reminder. Always everything is negotiable, all the way up until you close escrow. Whether you're the listing agent or the buyer's agent, recognize that. If you're a listing agent and they send you something and they want to negotiate it, it's your job to do it, right? Depending on how strong you are in negotiating skills and what position your client holds, that'll determine whether you can actually get it or not. But never be afraid of negotiating, even at the nth hour, or if condition has already been met or something like that happens. You never completely understand where the other party is, right? And also, always remember, your first duty is your client and what they want and what they need. I had a great example a couple of weeks ago. Our team had a listing. The buyer was past contingencies, and they only had one more contingency, and they asked for a price reduction, right? Now, I didn't get offended when the buyers asked. I know what the contract said. I know what they had agreed to, and they asked. And we got on the phone, and I gave my opinion to our sellers that they didn't have to accept it. They could force through the transaction based on what was agreed to already. But for their own reasons, they said, we'll accept the deal. We'll drop it, right? Now, the competitor in me was like, I don't want to lose on this deal. We have the stronger position. I don't want to give them the $25,000 that they asked for, right? But I had to remember, it's not my deal. It's not my transaction. It's not my wants and needs or my ego that has to be fulfilled here. It's my client's wants and needs. It's what they want to have happen. And so I felt I explained our position. I explained what I thought their relative strength was, but for their own reasons, they agreed to it, right? So there's an example. Did I lose? Well, in my head and my ego said I lost, right? I lost negotiating on a drop in price when I didn't think we had to. But guess what? Our client was super happy, right? Always remember that. I always like to give another key to agents when it comes to contracts and negotiating. Never lose just because you're right. What does that mean? Never lose just because you're right. I was right, in my opinion, that we didn't have to accept that reduction in price. All the numbers, all the data, market conditions, I was 100% sure we didn't have to, right? But my client, our team's client wanted it. And I didn't question their needs. Once I had fully explained our position, they told me what they wanted and we did it, right? Never lose just because you're right. Always put your client ahead of whatever you want or what you need to have happen. All right, talking through the offer. All right, this is going to be cool. This is where I'm going to try to, usually in an Ignite class, you all have a copy of the contract that I'm going to use. I'm going to try to put it up here so we can talk about it. And this is the fun part with contracts for me, if it could be a fun part. All right, talking through the offer with your client. Review the contract. Be sure your buyer understands it. Review details like price, closing date, inspection, contingencies, conveyances, etc. Know what is essential in your area. Know standard or common terms for offers in your area. Avoid rookie agent mistakes. Now, remember the homework I gave you or the idea I gave you, especially if you're newer, you're getting started, you're trying to figure it out. You're going on to MLS. You don't have a buyer yet, but there's a new listing in your farm. You go in, you look at it, whether on MLS in the photos or actually visit it. Then you go through all the buyer checklist, make sure you know where each one is, how to access it, how to read through it and explain it. Reviewing the contract, be sure the buyer understands the contract. Your buyer will only understand it if you understand it. You don't want to be your first or second or fifth or 10th time going through the contract live with your buyer. You want to have done it 30, 40, 50, 100 times. You can do that once a week. You can do that twice a week on a real property. And I'm going to tell you why you do it on a real property in a second. You're reviewing the details like price, closing date, inspection, contingencies, conveyances, all those things, right? So as you're practicing it, you're going through all these things, you're learning all the steps, you're doing it over and over, you're getting really comfortable with it, you're understanding it so you can better explain it when you have a real client. you're going to put the price you think it should go for. You're going to put the terms, the closing date, right? And then you're going to follow that property until it actually closes. Once it actually closes, a lot of the things that you put in your preparation and your practice pop up on MLS, don't they? What was the final sale price? Did it close in 10 days, 30 days, 60 days? Did it TFT? How did it compare to other properties in the market? This is how you start applying, even as a newer agent, your skill, your practice, and the reality on the ground, right? You don't have to wait to close your first 10 deals to learn how to do the deals. When you learn to engage with the MLS, when you learn to engage with the process, when you learn to engage with these steps, these checklists, going to them over and over and over, you'll be that much better each time. In this market, as fast as it's moving, you can get a call from your buyer in the morning saying, I like this house. They go see it. If it's a Sunday night and offers are due Monday morning, you don't have time to go pull this out and practice. And then where's the checklist? How do I look up prices? How do I look up the listing agent's performance? You've already done it many times in practice. You've already done all these things. You'll know where all your tools are. You'll know how to do this. You'll have some experience in practicing pricing and terms and see how did it result, right? So don't forget that, right? So let's go into this. If you don't have one in front of you, you can always pull it out later. We're going to go over some of these items on the actual contract. Right. All right, first thing. If you have never read the contract from start to finish, make a commitment now that you'll do it. I can tell you in my past life, I managed a large office. I was a managing broker. What managing broker means, the DRE designation means that I stand in the place of the broker of record. That means I was responsible for every contract, every transaction. If the agent made a mistake, that means I made the mistake. If the agent got sued, that means I got sued. And I was not going to let that happen, right? So earlier when I said I reviewed close to $5 to $6 billion worth of real estate contracts, I had to sit there and read every one of them and put my signature on it. Things have changed now. Won't go into how they do it now, but when I started back in 2010, every single offer, every single contract that came into our office from our agents, I had to review it. So I've read it many, many times, and it's all its iterations. I feel I'm very, very good at it. I say I'm good because we closed a lot of transactions and we never got sued. I don't know how else to measure being good at contracts, but that's how I term you're able to close, get into contract and close, and you don't get sued. Make the money and then keep it. That is showing a high level of fiduciary responsibility to your clients, to agents in my case. And then I'm going to share with you, what would I look for in that position? Imagine if you had to review 30, 40, 50, 100 contracts a month, and you had to look for mistakes, and you had to look for problem areas, and you had to look where maybe it was weak and could be strengthened to increase the chances of getting it accepted, right? That's how I learn contracts, right? Really just read them, go through them, go look at a bunch of contracts over and over and over and over. And I'm going to share some of those tips with you. Very first thing, simple things, right? I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. Down below, usually it'll tell you, right? It'll have your information. Agents move. I mean, I know all of you are going to stay with KW, but agents move, right? If I'm a listing agent and up here it says offer from Robert Cruz at Coldwell Banker, and down here on my standard form it says Robert Cruz at KW, let's just say I'm like, okay, this person is not that serious. They're not up to date. They're not paying attention to details, right? Never want to be caught like that. So today, go make sure that your car forms have your proper information, contact information, and things like that. You don't want the information down here not to match what you're going to put up here. All right. And so what do you put up here? Right. You start with the terms of the property. You put who the offer's from, the correct property address, the parcel number, and all those things, right? I can tell you early in my career, I saw a deal where a buyer came to sell his house, and we found out that he owned his neighbor's house because they had put the wrong parcel number. And somehow, this was back in like 2007 when crazy things happened. He had lived in the wrong house for 5 years. When he was trying to sell it, it was a big problem because all the way through the process, the wrong parcel number was on there. And it was 2 units built at the same time next door. So never underestimate where a problem can occur, right? Spell your name right, put the right information, make sure the address and the parcel number is correct. Put in the seller's brokerage firm, look up their license number. Don't be that agent that doesn't want to go to DRE website and look it up. It's on MLS too. Make sure it's the right number. Don't make those simple mistakes. If you make the simple mistakes, you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're increasing the likelihood that the listing agent is going to look at you as a non-serious agent, not a professional agent, not a thorough agent. And that's going to be a problem. Neela, you have your hand raised?
Yeah. Can I interrupt?
You might have to write down your question.
Yeah, I want to find out about your example about owning the wrong
If you
home.
get a chance, write your question in chat, and I'll get to it.
Okay, all right, thank you.
It's the simple things. You've done the hard work. You've acquired the client. You've done your pricing. You've done all that pre-work. Put it on paper. Do not make mistakes here, right? Let's get into once you've got buyers, brokers, your information, and understand if it is dual agency or not, right? A lot of agents, unfortunately, don't understand what dual agency is. Obviously, they understand if they're representing the buyer and seller, it's dual agency. But when the brokerage is the same, even though there's 2 agents, that's dual agency. Don't get that wrong. Make sure you do that correctly. Once you get in there, put in the purchase price. Under terms of purchase allocation of cost, line item A, purchase price. If it's all cash, you mark it. If it's not all cash, then there's a step down, right? I like how they've adjusted the forms like this. It's just a decision tree, right? You put in the offer you're making. Is it all cash? Yes, check it there. If it's not, you keep going down, right? Close of escrow. You can write in 30 days after acceptance or any amount of days after acceptance or a specific date. Now, going backwards, when I said reach out to your loan officer, make sure you have a good conversation with them. If there is a loan involved, you want to know, can our lender close in the time specified? This is a place where you can stand out and you can say, if you can close in 20 days, generally people like money faster than not. And if you talk to your loan officer and you can close faster, and you talk to the listing agent and that matters to the seller, then you want to try to do this, right? It doesn't have to be the standard 30 days. If your loan officer calls you and says, you know what, we've got some issues, I'm going to need 35 days, then that's the best offer you can write. Take that advice. Don't be worried or scared that it's not going to be accepted because it's not 30 days or less. Worst thing is you don't follow the advice of the loan officer. You go put 30 days or less just to get accepted, and then you're scrambling at the end with your buyer's deposit or worse because you were not diligent in listening and communicating with all parties. So the best offer your client can put is the best offer they can put. If they need more than 30 days, you put it. Try to win in other places. You want to go in and put in a time and place for the expiration of offer. Here's another really interesting thing, right? I see a lot of agents with a lot of different philosophies. Some will say, make them decide fast, give them 24 hours, give them 10 hours, give them 12 hours, put the expiration of the offer, right? Whatever you and your buyer agree to, I'm fine with it. I'm cool with it. If you and your buyer say, give them 48 hours, I'm not going to tell you you're crazy. I'm not telling you to speed it up. I'm not going to tell you to slow it down. Again, that's what you and your buyer want. Remember I said this is a living document. I'll probably start an argument because I've had this argument before, but I've won it with it many times. What if you put down in this part, you say, give them 24 hours to respond. So you prepare the offer, you send it, it's Monday at 11 a.m., you send it over, you acknowledge receipt, and it says here they have 24 hours to respond to you, right? What happens on hour 25 if you have not gotten a response? Is your offer dead? In the short term, it is, right? But remember I said it's a living document. So let's say you put 24 hours and then 30 hours later, you get a response from the seller, we accept the offer. Do you have a deal or not? Are you in contract? You are,
Yes.
right? Now, I would suggest to you, put an addendum extending the offer deadline just to be ultra safe. But there's a concept in contracts, and this is kind of like high level, but if two parties are acting like they're in contract all the way through, that's enforceable, right? I don't recommend it, but I want to make that point. I want you to understand contracts to this level. I think agents spend too much time worrying about, should we put a short response time or longer response time? Again, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong if you say short or long. You say completely understand how this works. Another reason agents want to give a short period of time. Neela, you had a question on the title. It was all a fiasco. It was problems all the way down the line. But the point I'm trying to make, the part you control is, did the realtor put the right parcel number? You can't control what the title company did. They did make a mistake, the title company too. But you control what you control. You get your part right, right? So going back to that, I hear a lot from agents, give them a short time so they can't shop your offer, right? Again, I'm not going to tell you it's right or wrong. Just understand how contracts work. If you're afraid to make an offer early or want to give them a very small window of time to respond to you for fear that they're going to take your offer and try to beat it with something else, right? They could, right? But then again, did you put forth your highest and best offer? If you did, there's nothing wrong with going early. I prefer going early, right? You don't know who's coming behind you. You don't know if anyone's coming behind you. If you're trying to get a deal, if you're trying to write under what it's really, really worth, then maybe that's a tactic. Maybe it's a panicky seller, and maybe they're like, as soon as they get an offer. But make sure you have a plan behind it. Make sure you have a theory. And most importantly, your buyer subscribes to that theory, right? Don't be the one who decides, I'm not going to give them much time to respond because it was your decision. Make sure that's your buyer's decision. Make sure they understand the possibilities in this line of, should we give them a lot of time, standard time, more time? And then understand, if you give them any amount of time and they respond after it, you can still get in contract. So again, the point here is, don't overthink it. When you do come up with a plan, make sure it is your buyers in agreement with it, and then stick to it. And once you do that, you're okay. And spend a lot of time on one little box there, but that's how impactful the contract can be when you really, really understand it. You really understand what's going on. If you followed the process and you made the outreach and you know there's a ton of people looking and there's a ton of interest in the property, and this might affect the window you give them to respond. If it's been there for 30 days and there's no activity on it and it's overpriced or whatever you might think about it, well, then that might give you input into how you would want to frame that, right? So there is no inconsequential box. There's no more important or less important item on here. They all work together. there's give and take. If you can't go higher, then make it more enticing in other areas like that. And understand that idea that it's a living document. It can always be amended. It can always be changed as long as the two parties are in agreement. All right. The initial deposit amount. Accepted practice in our area. Earlier it said, know what's common in your region. It's 3%. Right. That's quite common. You see, you put the initial deposit amount and a fixed number or a percentage, and then it says how long before you deposit it, right? Keynote here, some people, I won't say who, think you can make multiple offers on the property. And I get asked that all the time. And can one buyer make offers on multiple properties? Do we want to hazard a guess? Not a trick question. Someone wrote something. Yes, Sarah, you're correct. You can write multiple offers with one single buyer. However, that means they might have to end up buying 2 houses or 3 houses, right? So what I mean by that is be careful when you ask questions like that. Technically, can you write more than one offer? Yes. What if they're both accepted? Right? And it leads to this part. Because some people think, well, if my deposit's not in, I'm not in contract and they can't go after our deposit if it's not there. Right? They absolutely can go after your deposit. So be very, very careful. Ask your broker. I'm giving you my opinion. When anyone asks me, can you make multiple offers with the same buyer on multiple properties? I tell them, yes, if you want to buy 2 houses. And I'm not trying to be smart or glib. That's what you're committing to, the possibility of buying 2 or 3 houses, or having deposit on 1 or more be at stake. And do not fall for that myth that realtors say, oh, as long as you don't put your deposit in, they can't go after it. They absolutely can go after it, right? So I do not recommend it. If it's an agent on my team or if I'm writing, I tell them, pick a house. You have to pick a house. I'm not going to put you in a position where because of like false understandings of how the process works, saying, oh, your deposit won't be at risk. If we get accepted on one, we'll just not deposit on the other and we'll cancel it, right? Don't get in that habit. Practice your craft. Pick the house that they really, really want, write the winning offer on that one. Again, you can ask your broker. The answer is yes, you can write multiple offers, but that puts you and your client in a ton of jeopardy. Sarah asked, if one offer got accepted first, can you tell the second offer that you want to withdraw the second offer? Again, the answer is yes. You can always negotiate. What if the second says, no, we're not going to release you, right? So Sarah, that's the question. When you're talking about contracts, be careful. Can I do this? The question isn't, can I do it? The question you should always ask is, what are the consequences for my client and myself and my brokerage if I do this, right? So see how that's a different question? Can I ask the second to release us? Yes, you can. Do they have to? That's questionable, right? So be careful how you ask the questions. When you truly understand the contract and how it works, you can get to this kind of level. I see a lot of young agents, in my opinion, make that mistake, especially in fast-moving markets. They'll submit multiple offers, right? That is tricky, that is questionable ethically, and that is a lot of liability for you, your broker, and your buyer. I do not recommend it. So again, with contracts, can you do it? Yes. Almost anything in a contract, as long as it's not illegal, as long as it's not expressly legal in the state or county you're working, you could do in a contract. 2 adults can agree to do something that's legal with it when they both consent and agree and put it in writing. That's a contract, right? Should you? What are the possibilities? What are the liabilities? What are the consequences if it doesn't go perfectly? That's always what should be on your mind when asking the question, can I do this in a contract? Fair enough? It's just tiny little matters, but they're important. And then again, practice, you get better and better and better and better. When you're taking these kind of shortcuts, you're shortcutting your success. You're not getting really good at pricing. You're not getting really good at negotiating. You're not getting really good at writing an offer that'll get accepted. You're like, I'll just write a bunch of offers and hope one sticks, and then we'll pull out of the rest, right? I've never seen a really successful realtor do that. I'll tell you that. All right, so next one, increased deposit. This is another one that gets people, right? This could be a way to entice a seller to accept your offer if you don't think it's stronger than some others. Maybe you're 40, 50K lower in price than someone else. You have all the same terms. Well, what if you agreed to put an increased deposit into escrow before close of escrow? Might that entice the seller, right? If you're in counter offers, that might be something you explore. But here's the thing. Do you understand liquidated damages, right? If you put a 3% deposit and your buyer does not commit or close or react to the terms in the contract and needs to pull out, once they're past certain contingencies, their deposit is at risk, but it's only the 3%, right? If you put an increased deposit, the listing agent, if they're protecting their client, will have you sign a liquidated damages agreement, which will increase the risk. So before you agree or want to write in an increased deposit to make your offer stronger, make sure your buyer and you understand if they get this and they ask us to sign a liquidated damages agreement, that increases the potential loss if the deal goes south, right? If you know your client is strong, they're going to love it, they're going to like it, and they agree to an increased deposit to make their offer stronger, maybe the listing agent doesn't force you to sign liquidated damages, then you're good. But if they do, have an agreement before you ask to do that or plan on doing that, that your buyer understands the increased risk if they have to sign a liquidated damages and move forward, right? So there's always unintended consequences when you don't understand the contract fully. This is why you read it. This is why you practice it. Can you give an example how you would write an increased deposit on a sample you have on your screen? Sure, right? So $1,075,000 is the offer. We put 3% down, 80% loan. And you look at the very bottom, it says balance of down payment, $182,000. That's what the buyer in this scenario would have to come to close of escrow, right? So what if we knew we were really neck and neck with another buyer? And we thought, you know what if we entice them with an increased deposit? Put in an extra $30,000 or $50,000 in an increased deposit, goes into escrow. Now, instead of, in this case, $32,000 initial deposit sitting in escrow, you've got $82,000 sitting in escrow, right? Might that be a reason for the seller to favor yours over another offer, right? Now, again, if that is going to make you stronger and make the seller think, oh, they're putting more skin in the game, they're more dedicated, they're more likely to see it to a close. So these two are neck and neck, I'll pick the one with an increased deposit. All right, you do that. Now, is there going to be a liquidated damages clause signed? If there's not, you're good. Only 3% is at risk. If the seller, which they should, if they're taking a good contracts class and they understand what liquidated damages are, they'll say increased deposit, sign this liquidated damage agreement. That puts the entire amount above and beyond 3% at risk, right? Is that a net benefit or a net negative to your buyer? If your buyer is iffy, I wouldn't do that. You're increasing their liability. I'd rather go find them another house. It sometimes feels like it, but there's always another house, right? If they're like, Robert, I'm good. I've got the cash. I won't want to lose this one. I understand liquidated damages. We're going to close, make the offer stronger. I go for it. Not because it's what I want or what I need or because I need to win. All those are true. Just a competitor. It's because I've explained it and that's what my buyer wants, right? And again, I'm only doing that because I've done my homework. I've reached out to a listing agent. I've looked at the market. I know it's competitive. I know there's going to be 10 offers. I know we're probably pretty good on price, but there might be someone equal or slightly better. How do I make my deal stronger, right? If I've done all of that homework, And I go to my buyer and I go, I know you really like it. I know you really want it. I know you don't want to miss this one. And we can't go higher on price. But you've got 180 that you're going to put in close anyway. What if we increase the deposit? That's the kind of conversation you'd want to have. Right? And they say, what does that mean? Well, you've got to explain it. Right? So this is why you practice. This is why you get into this and understand these things. Hope that answered the question, Warren. All right. So it's complicated, right? It's not just fill in the blanks and put it in. A lot of thought goes into it, a lot of practice. Again, I had the luxury of going over billions of dollars worth of real estate contracts. I've seen what wins, I've seen what loses, right? You don't have to go through what I did and read that many contracts, wait for that many live deals. You should always be practicing. You should always be practicing. It doesn't matter how new you are. There's no reason for you not to understand the contract, not to read it. When you read it, here's what's going to happen. You're going to read a part and you're like, what does that mean? Right? So do you want to get to the what does that mean when you have a live buyer, or when you can go to your broker and say, what does this mean? Or you're like, hey, Robert, you taught this class in Ignite a couple of months ago. What does this mean? Right? Find out when there's no harm, no foul. It will come up. I know you all want to have a big, meaningful real estate career. That means a lot of buyers, a lot of sellers, a lot of transactions, a lot of negotiating. Every possible question that could come up in a contract eventually will in your career. When you're diligent and you practice this and you go over it over and over and over, right? Dedicate 30 minutes, dedicate an hour each week to read the contract. Pick a farm area, pick an area where you'd like to work, track a home that goes on the market. You don't have a buyer for it, but you can take out your checklist. What if I had a buyer and they like that property? What would I do? Here's my checklist. I know where all the forms are. I've read them all. I understand what they mean. I understand what are the what ifs. I understand how I would approach it. And then you wait for it to close. And how close were you? Right? All right. So loan amount. Another huge area where mistakes are made. How am I doing on time? Okay, got about 5 minutes. We'll get to the rest of the page. Loan amount. All right, again, you've got a good relationship with your loan officer. You had good conversations with them. You understand the relative merits of your client from the lender's standpoint, what they can or can't do, right? And whatever it is, don't make these mistakes, right? They tell you it's going to be an 80-20 loan, 20% down, 80% loan. You put that amount there. Put the amount first. Where I see so many agents make mistakes, and it can be an incredible mistake, is they put the loan amount or the percentage, but they don't fill in the not to exceed 5.5 or whatever that is, right? Why is that a mistake? Especially in these volatile times when interest rates can go up and down. I can't stress this enough. Especially in these times when interest rates are volatile, they can go up and down by quite a bit, right? Let's say I wrote this offer and I made it non-contingent, because sometimes that's what it takes to win here. And I put 20% down. He's going to get an $860,000 loan. And I did not put not to exceed 5.5%, right? What if halfway through interest rates go up? I haven't locked the loan, another mistake agents make, and the interest rate shoots back up to 7. And all of a sudden my client can't afford the house. I can't go back and say, oh, they can't afford the loan, right? They're like, sure, they can get it at 7%. Well, no, that's not what we wanted, but that's not what you wrote, right? So, being say, how do you look at the closing results of the property after it's closed? Go back on MLS. It's going to be shown on MLS as sold, as closed, and you'll be able to get some good information. You'll be able to get how long it took to close, and what it's sold at, what was the price, right? You don't get a lot of the details, but again, if you're following the market, you're following the trends, even those 2 talking points give you a lot of information. And if it's in an area you really want to work, heck, take the listing agent out for coffee and say, you would be surprised how many agents will help you out like that? Right? And if you don't ask, they won't help you. If you ask and 8 tell you no and 2 say yes, especially if they're experienced agents, you can learn a lot. You can tell them, I did this, I tracked your listing and this is what I found. Well, you can learn so much. Never be afraid to go out and ask questions and learn. When you're starting from that position and you're not afraid of doing these things, your learning curve will accelerate like crazy. All right. So, man, I hope that answered that question. So back to this, really important. When you don't put not to exceed 5.5 or whatever your loan officer tells you to, and rates change and it exceeds it, that's not going to be reason to get out. If you can still qualify for the loan amount, the interest rate would go up, the payment would go up, and perhaps make it unaffordable or undesirable for your buyer. Do not make that mistake. Talk to your loan officer and put the number in, right? If you're a listing agent, this is a fair warning. If someone puts in a crazy number in there, all right, how real is the deal, right? You should know what interest rates are. And if someone puts it 3% in there, it's like, nah, this is not real. This is not going to be, it's a big red flag. So don't make that mistake. Please go in and put that in every single time. Similarly, if it's an FHA buyer or VA or anything else you see on the right here, check it. Don't take shortcuts. Don't make those mistakes. You will be bound. You can be bound to what you put there. If you don't put anything, that means anything is possible. You don't want to put yourself or your buyer in that position. Be diligent, be thorough. Again, write the best offer you can. If you have a VA buyer, I know some agents think, oh, listing agents aren't fair. They're not going to accept our VA offer. Put it in. Put it in. If you don't do it right, they might be bound to the purchase or have their deposit at risk because you failed to check that it was a VA offer, not conventional or anything else. So never be afraid of it. It's the best offer you can put, and it doesn't win. You maintain the integrity and trust of your buyer. And again, although sometimes it feels like it's not, there's always another property. Maintaining the relationship, keeping your fiduciary duty, understanding the relationship you have with your client, your duty to explain, your duty for them to understand, help them understand, and make the best possible case for themselves in each property is never a wrong move. It is never a wrong move. When you're inexperienced or lack confidence, you might not feel that way, and you might be tempted to take shortcuts or anything like that. That's the wrong path. Take your lumps, you will learn, you will get better and better and better. There's so many places in the contract when you do it right, simply present it professionally, present it in a way that is going to encourage them to accept it, show your professionalism. The bottom line, each seller, each listing agent, do they want the highest possible number? Yes. Do they want the shortest possible time to close? Yes. But what they really want is to close. That's what every seller and every listing agent wants. They want to close. You can start from the very beginning to present yourself as an agent that closes. They've never met you. They don't know if you've done 1 or 10 or 15 houses, right? Or 50. But the best agents have clean, crisp contracts. Your very first one can look like that. So understanding that listing agents and sellers do favor professionals, experienced agents, look like one from the very beginning. Know the contract. Read it tonight if you've never read it. Read it again the next day. Read it again the next day, right? It is your tool. After you've done all the hard work of finding that buyer, after you've done the hard job of looking for an acceptable property in this market with this lack of inventory, why would you fail here? Why would you fall off here? The beauty is this is all pre-work. You have your study guide. You have your checklist. You can, I'm sure, ask for or receive these slides that just walked through, right? I'm reading you what's on the slide. You can read this anytime. I'm interjecting with some of my own experience, my own knowledge and things like that. But the bottom line is dedicate some time and some effort to mastering this part of your craft. It seems boring, right? It seems boring. But boring can be incredibly effective in this business. Boring can be the reason you win. What I mean by that, you're diligent, you take the time, you check the spellings, you check the fonts, you check that your names and information match everywhere. You check every box, nothing gets glossed over. And those are things you can control. How much your client can afford, what they want to write, they control that. You don't. They want a 30-day close or 25-day close. That is between them and their lender, not you. How much they want to put down, you're not in control of so much of this. This paperwork, the understanding of how each clause, each paragraph interacts, how it can set you apart, more importantly, sets your buyer apart from others, right? If someone can write 100K higher and 7-day close, no negotiating or my perfect contract is going to beat that, right? Don't misunderstand this. But the reality is that every buyer has competition at their own level, right? They will find that. If they can't compete at a certain price or in a certain neighborhood, they will eventually find their area where they're going to be able to close. That's where your expertise in the contract, that's where your understanding of the contract, that's where negotiating from the contract, understanding how they interplay, how it works, will allow you to pull wins out of the fire. Right. So promise 10 minutes. I think only have 5 minutes, and then I gotta get out of here because the next group is waiting. Is there any last minute questions that anybody wants to type up? Sarah writes, multiple offer situation. Can the listing agent choose only one offer to counter or counter with all the offers? Yes, they can. So if there's 10 offers and the listing agent can offer multiple counter 2 or all 10, they can also only pick one and counter that one, right? That could be in a case where in multiple counter, there's multiple, that many offers, 10, 15, 20 offers, there's going to be a wide spread in offer price or turns between the best and the worst. A lot of listings will just like, okay, these people are at 100K off. No point in countering them. I've got 4 people within $25,000 of the top price or best terms. They can choose to only counter that small group. Sarah, how many to close? I'm assuming it says days to closing after acceptance is ideal in this market. In communication with your lender and your client, the faster you can close, the better. We're humans on the other side. You're basically saying, can I give you money faster? Right? So when you can, again, that takes really good communication, Sarah, with your loan officer and your buyer. If the best you can do is 30 days, do not be afraid of putting 30 days. If the best you can do is 40 days and that protects your buyer, put 40 days, right? In this market, the faster, the better. That is a truism. That is always true, but never faster than you can actually close. Any other questions? Can you recommend any lenders? Absolutely. If you email me at robert@ludsoncruz.com, the good thing about all these years in this business, I can easily tell you probably 10, 15 great loan officers that can close and work like this. They're not going to be upset when you call them and ask them, how fast can you close? They're going to respond right away. They understand what you're doing and they're as professional and understand the process and terms just like you do. And they are eager to help you close. Even when you get newer loan officers, asking certain questions like that can tell you if they're going to be good or not. But yeah. All right. They are at the gate. So I'm gonna close off. They put my email, robert@ludsoncruz.com. If I said it in passing earlier, lean on your broker, lean on experienced agents. You will be shocked at how many of us will take the time to answer your questions, no matter how seemingly simple. And I'll be real honest. Here's why I'll answer your questions. You might write an offer on one of my team's listings one day, or my team might write an offer on your listings. So the more great agents are trained out there in the process, the better I'll do, the better you'll do. So any questions you might have, reach out to your broker first, your friends. But if you want someone that has done a lot of this, shoot me an email and I'll help you. All right. Thank you, everybody. Stay dry out there and let me clear out so they can start the next meeting. Thank you.